Right. Associative.
Okay, wonderful.
Any questions? Anything on your mind before we go? There's a new version of the beginning Tlingit workbook. I put it up on tlingit.info last night. Within the clan section, there was just a number of spelling errors in there. Pup, on was spelled 3 different ways. So we'll find the right spelling for that. And then there are a number of just things that didn't have tone marks. I was able to fix that. It was fairly minor in the grand scheme of things. And then there was also one error in pronoun triangles, which we'll take a look at today. So opening this, let's see, we were somewhere around, we get all the way through this stuff, right? So let's find this page. It's 47 in my book, but I think it's a little different maybe in your guys'. H, you doing okay? Right. So we're just doing a little bit of a review here, jumping back to our pronoun triangles. These are the singular versions that we're looking at. We're going through these things. We would call this Kindertürkensin. Kindertürkensin. So you've got kin, which is upwards, da, to go round, kindas is sort of go upwards, turk is the butt of something, sin, so it's the butt of carrot. So upside down carrot, that's the word for trying. It's really fun to sort of work with elders and find what some of the newer names are for things. I had to come up with names for things sometimes. There's an elder I'm working with. We're coming up with terms for Tlingit grammar, which is really exciting. Because I was talking to folks in Hawaii, and they said by year 2, they said by halfway through year 2, they're just done with English. I don't know how they do that. I'm just really curious. But they said one of the big things that they did is they came up with grammatical terms for their language within their own language. Because as second language learners, they had to teach all these concepts. That's really fun. All right, so we're going to go start with these independent pronouns. Khat, 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 wa'eh, 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 ho, 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 ach, 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 eh, 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 do, 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 do. Kha, 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 eh, 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 eh. 0 mark. So let's get used to that. Third person subject will always be, there'll be no pronoun in it. So to stress that again, like if we were speaking English with Tlingit grammar, you'd say, I'm counting, you're counting, count. And that's how you'd say he or she or it is counting. There's no pronoun after the third person. The trickiest one is probably having a 0 pronoun for the object. Because I find myself saying a lot, I'll just throw this thing ut in there, which is actually incorrect unless you're just saying, and that just means something, right? And so a lot of times I'll just say At kach shechit, where I should just be saying kach shechit. I wrote it. I wrote something. And there might be certain cases where you're doing that. But you just think of the at thing as being sort of any old thing. And we'll get to there, these sort of indefinites that are exist in Tlingit, but we'll just start with these three. But just remember that there's a zero there for third person. And that's how it goes, for third person. So if you're saying, I threw it, or I ate it, you don't have to say, it doesn't need to be a pronoun for that thing. So you would, if you were using, again, English Tlingit grammar, you would just say, I ate. And the it just sort of, it's just a given. So with your objects, chat, zero. It will change to an A if it's a third person. So you would have Chwacha, I ate it. Yecha, you ate it. Awacha, he or she ate it. So you get an A at the front because you have two pronouns there. So if you're going to have two, they couldn't both be the zero mark. One would have to change to the A. It will always be one. Did you get that?
So you had the A before it then?
Yeah, so yeah, and so also the way that Tlingit grammar functions is it goes object, subject, verb. So in English, I'd say I ate it, you ate it, he or she ate it. But then in the Tlingit grammar, you would, if you were using Tlingit grammatical structure, you would say it, I ate, it, you ate, it, he or she ate. And then you get chwacha, yecha, awacha. And that's how it gets put together. So that's another thing that you've got to think of. And with English, the pronoun is sort of, it disappears once you get specific. So if you said, I ate spaghetti, you ate spaghetti, he or she ate spaghetti. So then the it disappears. But if we were going to use Tlingit grammar, we would say, it, I ate spaghetti, it, you ate spaghetti, it, he or she ate spaghetti. So the pronoun would always be there. It never goes away, even if you're specifying the thing. So if you say, the dog chased the cat, the dog, it, chased it, the cat. And that's how Tlingit grammar works. And so because of that, the specifying nouns, they can move around. So you could say, ach tach, ach ish, asechan. My mother loves my father. Ach ta, ach ish, asechan. My father loves my mother. And then you can move around. Asechan, ach ish, ach tach. It's going to start to get a little funky, but you could do that. See, those parts are they're movable. And you could do some of that in English too. You could say, my mother loves my father. My father, my mother loves him. And so you can do some things like that as well. I think you find that you've got to sort of change the language around a little bit. And Tlingit's the same way. But as far as where those pronouns exist, that's non-negotiable. They have to be there. They have to be the same.
What's the
Oh, okay. So if you have like two specifying things in a sentence, or if at any point it becomes unclear who would be doing it, the ch just marks the subject.
Okay.
And so you would say ach tach, ach ish sechan. That's fine. So there's a couple of things that go on. One is, so if we're telling a story and this young man's fighting the cannibal giant, and then at one point the cannibal giant clubs him, and we need to, if the speaker thinks there might be some uncertainty who's really clubbing who, so now I'll say the cannibal hits him over the head. And so that CH marker, when it's on a noun, it's just telling you who's the subject of that sentence, who's the one doing it. And then because of that, that usually makes the A go away as well. So you could say, Ach ta asechan ach ish. But it gets a little bit unclear who's doing loving. In English, we would know, because the subject likes to go first. We mark them differently. But then, so you'd say, Ach ta ach ish sechan. Okay. All right, so jump it down, page 49, might be 47 for you guys. Can't remember. Is it 49 for you guys?
48.
48.
Dasai Jibu or?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's 49. Sorry.
Oh, that's right. Last night we had like totally different page numbers, and people were like, I'm just missing like 10 pages. And then it was just like, so, it was, and then the lights were out, so we had to move rooms. It was really interesting.
Lights went out?
They were having breaker problems.
Yeah, we were upstairs in the language lab yesterday afternoon, and the lights kept flickering. It was making me just blink like crazy. Yeah, Duke. It's blinking. Ka. 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 Dasa ejiwu.
Dasa Jibu.
Dasa ejiwu.
Dasa Jibu.
Kuhida achjiwu.
Kuhida Achjibu.
Kuhida achjiwu.
Kuhida Achjibu.
Dasa achjiwu.
Dasa Achjibu.
Dasa achjiwu.
Dasa Achjibu.
Gucha ejiwu.
Kuha Jibu.
Gucha ejiwu.
Kuha Jibu.
Dasa dujiwu.
Dasa Jibu.
Dasa dujiwu.
Dasa Jibu.
Kekyeti dujiwu.
Kekyati Jibu.
Kekyeti dujiwu.
Kekyati Jibu.
Danage ejiwu.
Danage Jibu.
Danage ejiwu.
Danage Jibu.
Hey! Dasa achjiwu.
Dasa Jibu.
Got nothing. Dasa. Oh, yeah. Adusa dana dujiwu.
Adusa Dana Jibu.
Adusa dana dujiwu.
Adusa Dana Jibu.
Dana dujiwu naweya.
Dana Jibu Nawaya.
Dana dujiwu naweya.
Dana Jibu Nawaya.
If I each, help me out.
Okay, so that what that is showing you, that phrase is just to have its possession. And to revisit possession, it works differently in Tlingit. It's just saying it's located in your possession. It's not using a verb. Use a verb when you do that in English. I had, you have. I had, you can conjugate it. You can't really conjugate that in Tlingit. You have it or you don't. And so that at the end means to be located somewhere. And you're not using a verb to talk about. It's the same one when we say gusu, gusugucha. You can say yadugucha, wedugucha, yudugucha. That on the end is saying something is just located somewhere.
Is there a way to say I had it at one point down people?
You could say kesh achji yidet. So you could say
No longer in my possession.
you would have to use a verb if you really wanted to do that. So you could say, and you would still use achji. So you could say dana achji utiyin. The money used to be in my possession. Yidet ko akesh achji. It's really right, a blues song right there. But what we see there also is we're learning how to, so when it's not, when it goes into a negative form, the falls off. Same thing, because if we said, kusuchune, and if I wasn't here, you could just say, kesh yat. So yadu The negative form is kesh yat. Like wade, kesh wade. You do, kesh yut. Hate, kesh hate. And so that's how those, he's like kesh yat, he or she is not here. And then the same thing with jiwu. So you say kesh ach ji. Because if it's not located there, the suffix goes away. Because the suffix means to be located somewhere. And it can attach to all kinds of nouns. So if you say nesh is home, someone says gusui kla. Neshu. She's at home. So what we also see is these things yadu, wedu, neshu, jibu. Those things are using independent pronouns when you're talking about where a person is. Wedu, he's right there. Hu. Those independent pronouns aren't used very often when we really look at how the Tlingit language functions. They're used to sort of use those things where somebody's located without using a verb. And it's not where they live and it's not where they work. It's just where they are. We're not talking about what they're doing. And the other thing, they're used to sort of specify. Like you could say, right? It was you. I told you. So you're sort of specifying something, just to put a little bit of emphasis on. But the other thing, this achjivu, ejivu, is showing us how to use that possessive pronoun as well. Your possession, my possession, his or her possession. And then that possession is used metaphorically a lot. So I was working with the speaker yesterday. It was really fun because I recorded him giving this speech like 2 years ago. And then we just translated it yesterday. And he kept saying, that guy right there. Because it'd been so long, I kind of forgot what he had said. So oh, yeah. That guy got it pretty good. So that was pretty fun. But you'd say, Hajit has awati hayuchatum. They put it in our possession, our language. And all the stuff in Tlingit speeches, where the other thing that happens is there's an awful lot of assumption that goes on with Tlingit. When somebody says that, you should understand that they're saying, our ancestors gave it to us. It's usually what they're talking about. And they often won't even, sometimes they'll mention Hashish Kohas, our grandparents. And then they'll go on and say a whole bunch of different things, and they're continuing to talk about our ancestors. And it's just amazing the way they talk about it. There was another verb he was using. And I'll show you guys the video next week. He says, it's like I'm blind and just reaching out for them still. My grandparents, the ones who taught me. It's just amazing. So we're going to see that G pop up all the time. To hand someone something, it's going to be there. Phone, say, Ach G tan. Talk to my hand. Right? Talk to my possession. Talk to that Ach G. And that's how the telephone works, because you're talking into your hand to someone else's. Okay. So now we're switching gears and we're looking at the subject. Dasa iyatim. Dasa iyatim. Speak chatin. Speak chatin. Speak chatin. Speak chatin. Speak get iyatim. Speak get iyatim. Speak get iyatim. Speak get iyatim. Cake. Cake chatin. Cake. Cake chatin. Cake. Cake chatin. Cake. So this is to see something and just abstractly, like I see this thing. It's not a specific thing. Like it's not you, or it's not this dog we've been talking about. It's just some dog, some black bear. I just see it. It's really what you're communicating. Oh, yeah. Jeez. All right, so moving through our next set of phrases, going down. This is one of my favorite things. I got it from Nora somewhere. I can't remember the original source. It might be, I bet you it's Haturunaku. Ha'atubu ha'kostiyachsati. Our atu are our life. Wasa itu wasak. Oh, what's our name gonna be? We'll use Jimmy and Susie. I gotta show you guys these puppet videos too. Wasa itu wasak. Susie yechet tu wasak. Susie yechet tu wasak. Wasachat tu wasak. Wasachat tu wasak. Jimmy ye tu wasak. Jimmy ye tu wasak. Wasa tu wasak. Wasa tu wasak. Nadab ye tu wasak. Nadab ye tu wasak. So there's the thing that we remember here is there's a couple things that are really interesting with this. I was working with some elders a couple of weeks ago, and I was just going through a phrase list, and I had wasa listed as how. And they said, well, wasa is what? And then we sort of had a discussion about it. And it's really interesting because the thing about it is Tlingit uses those terms a little bit differently. And so when you say wasa itu wasa, most people would translate that as what is your name? But the literal translation is how do people call you? Right? And so it's a how statement. But we don't it just gets used a little bit differently in these two languages. And so what we also have is and so since it's how do people call you, it's the object pronoun that changes in this case. So you'd say, Kone yechet du wasam, and then I'd say, Naweya ye it du wasam, Sacha ye du wasam. And that ye du wasam it's powerful. It's a third person pronoun, so that could be he, she, or it. So you could say, Auk ye du wasam yata ya'ani. This land right here, it's called Auk. So you'd be talking about the land. You'd be talking about Kenaka Yetu was Southway. Ishk Yao Kain. That big blue boat is called Kenaka. So you can use it in the context of using the language a lot, describing what things are. If you need to stop and sort of point something out. There was a story about Raven and his uncle. Tlingit ani aya. Angasaku. Stikat at Yahin Tag, Stikat Tlingit ani. Yes, Kaa. Gustunach with Jakin. Khat ina yet the shoe at Tunach. Just Achuti. Kahwasach was a good kaja, Positive. Kaja ayakunach yake, Positive. Kaantaya ausitin, Kaja. Kaja yedu was some. You that can get us out, cook. Kaja. That from Jimmy Johnson, which he says, the whole world flooded, and then Raven flew up through the clouds and stuck his nose through the sky. And he's just hanging there thinking, boy, it sure would be nice to see Kaja. And then in the story, he keeps saying that, and he says, oh, but the Tlingits of today, they don't know what it is. It's a giant kelp bear. So he sees it, and then he thinks about it enough, and then he sees it, and he goes down and lands it. So it's a really powerful one to use. And you can also, as we go a little bit further with this, so here's another way to say your name. Susie Aya Achsai.
Susie Aya Achsai.
Susie Aya Achsai.
Susie Aya Achsai.
Kijk, ga geen nacht Susie Jechet doen, Saf.
Susie
Kijk, ga geen nacht Susie Jechet doen, Saf. Puppet na Chatzati. Yesh na Chatzati. Chak na Chatzati. Kluj na Chatzati. So what you got there is you also have an object pronoun. So if we have an object pronoun, how would I say you are Raven Moyet using that sentence?
You wouldn't use the word hot in there, right?
Right, chet would change.
That would change. Dusity, would that be part of that?
That's a good guess. That's a good guess.
And then,
Isati.
Huh?
Isati.
It's a T.
So you'd say Yesh nach Isati.
Okay.
So how would you say my father is eagle sign? Anybody online got any guesses?
Ish.
Good guess. That's a good guess. But yeah.
Ach ish ach nachsati.
Yeah. Ish ak nach sati. So the one thing that does happen is this verb sati gets a locative. You don't want anything to go in between that locative and the rest of the verb. So then you would say, so then the ach ish part could go at the beginning or the end. And as far as where you put information for Tlingit, whatever is generally the most important information goes at the front, right? It goes at the front. So if they said, who else in here is eagle? That was the question in Tlingit, and they were trying to figure out who all the eagles were. Ach ish ach nachsati. What moiety is your father? Ach nachsati ach ish. So that's how you decide what goes first. To answer whatever the question is or to deliver a certain piece of information. So Tlingit likes to front load things and say, we'll put the most important information.
Does that like Nach city work for a clan too? Not the Moed?
Yeah, you could say Shuka Chadi Na Chatzati. Most people probably wouldn't put the Na there though. They're just attached straight to the clan. Because you could have like Eqesta Na Na Chatzati. And that sounds kind of funny to say Na twice. And then you've got Chatzati, and that could be a clan, that could be a profession, that could be like a statement of character. Like you say, I'm a carver, right? You could say that. I'm a student of Tlingit. Now, I'm a drunk. You could say all kinds of things. You could say things, again, that hut part could change. So as we look at these phrases again, the goal of looking at them a second time or a third time is say, this is how you can start to change them. Because as you learn Tlingit, you learn this fill in the blank type stuff, but then you start learning how those things get manipulated, right? How you start to use the language. Because then you could say, my grandpa's a saner. Right? So you could say stuff like that and say what people do for a living. You just sort of say things like that, and it works as well to say you're differentiating what things are in some sort of story. Like if you saw something coming out of the bush and you're telling someone about it, I was walking my dogs, and when I had these two dogs, I was walking around Prince of Wales. And in Prince of Wales, you had lots of black bears and lots of deer. And I was walking, I heard something rustling in the woods, so I grabbed my dogs, and I saw these ears poke up. I was like, it's over, it's a bear, and then this deer head on it, so. And then you can say, aha, Pugwakan Sati. It was a Pugwakan.
I was wondering, would it be right to say Wasa Duwasa Isai?
You probably wouldn't say it. You could say, Dasa Isai. You could probably say that. Or you could say, in the context, you could also say Adusawe Isai. You could say something like that, which is because Sa means a name. So you'd say Sayi. It's the possessed form of a name. The other way that works is if you and I had the same Tlingit name, I will call you Sayi, my name. That's what I would call you. And the same with anybody who's ever had that name. You would call it Sayi. So for example, I could say, Chole Yechat Duwasa Shukach Ati Chatzati. Fenton Jacobs, you do a Sagun Achsayi. So Fenton Jacobs is my namesake. He's the one who had this name before me. And sometimes you'll do things like that, because if you go someplace and then people know your namesake, in the Tlingit way of thinking, you're also that person. You're your own person, but you are also that person.
So is that the same as Duwasa?
Yes, they're related. So sa means to name something, because you could say, if we came out of Pu'ik and the Shuknachati, did we tell us? Yes, we had a new name. Did we tell them?
I don't know. To other people. Chahi Lecha Duwasa. Nachadich. Achsai Nachaya. Ach Ish has Ukitan. Ach Shiku has Pawontan. Ach Dakanuk.
Okay. And so you can say, Chashi Aya Haschata Yasal. That's what they named me. So, or you wouldn't put the KW. Haschat Ayasal. Haschat Uwasa. There it is. So it conjugates. So that duwasa means to. It's when we get into verb roots in Tlingit, they have multiple meanings. So sa means to name something, right? I named this chair. Just run around naming everything. But like, so if I name my child, I can say, Shukwa aya kasehja. Khwasa akhsik. Chibuk aya awekudzati. So a long time ago, like a lot of times fathers would give their kids pet names. And sometimes it'd take them a while to figure out what the name. Sometimes they would say that's who that is. But then sometimes they want to figure out what the name should be. Because these names get recycled, because Tlingits get recycled as well. We should have that recycled Tlingit. I came back. Anyways, and so you could say like when my daughter was first born, I named her Kasechja. I knew that was her nickname, but that was also the first name she received. I didn't give her an English name or an official nickname for some time. It was probably 10 days before she got an English name, and it was a full year before she got a ceremonial name. So those types of things happen. But it also means to call out to somebody, right? Sacha! That's, calling out. Hasa, that's the same verb. So it just depends on the context, what that verb means. And we get that, sometimes with English, we get things like that, like, and I don't know, those are probably different verbs. English doesn't work the same, but like the verb to hit, that could be different. Right? If we're in a band, and I said, hit it! That's a little bit different than, like, I guess maybe it's the same. I hit him in the face. That's a little bit different, right? It's a completely different story.
On someone.
Yeah, you're going to hit on someone, so it's a slight variation of it.
So you certainly aren't going to hit them.
And then
Unless.
that song's a hit, right? And so you also have nouns. And so what you're going to see is the movement between the root and the noun itself. So I know you guys are just staring at the screen online. And you're going to get this as well. Important. Quite. Dr. Seuss away. A coach. Didn't you write that? Or did someone else write that?
No.
Or an egged an egg. It's funny in Tlingit. Quite is the verb. Playing it. So yeah, but the sa, but then when it comes out of, it's hard to say what comes first, the noun or the verb. There's certainly some, let me turn this off for a second. There are some verbs where the noun obviously comes first. So you could say, he or she acted like he or she knew what they were doing, really didn't. Kind of pretending. And that means, the verb means to raven. Begin to raven, right? Yeah, I know how to do that, sure. And then, is to talk like a raven, tell lies. And then there are others, hoots. And so there are nouns that can be made into verbs. Hoots. I put the brown bear, he or she put the brown bear inside of him and just dominated something like a wrestling match or basketball. Usually there's something physical involved. It could be metaphor. But then there's some where it can get pulled out like saw, to name, the name of something. And so sometimes we just got to remember, you say, saw, saw, ye. So when you pull it out, it's a low tone, a noun form. So. Any other questions? All right, turn the screen back. Moving along. Shukach adiyeti. Shukach adiyeti. Chukaneti dachchan. Chukaneti dachchan. Kiksati aya achtakanukhu. Kiksati aya achtakanukhu. So that dakanuku is a kinship term. It's not really used that often. It means your mother's father's people. You go back, what's your mother? Same thing as you. What's her mother? Same thing as you. What's your mother's father? And that's who your dakanuku is. Another way to say that would be kiksati achdakanuch sati. Kiksati achdakanuch sati. So the goal with learning these different phrases and these ways to put things, so that if you did stand up to introduce yourself, you're not saying ayachet, ayachet, ayachet all the time, right? Which is just sort of, people learn that one phrase, it means I am. Because you say, and people end up saying like, I am Chwane, I am Shukachati, I am Raven, I am Skagway, I am Chilku. And it just starts to sound kind of little, it can annoy a fluent speaker. It's a good starting point, but we want to sort of diversify from there and learn different ways. Talk about ourselves. What's a really good exercise, and what we'll probably try before the semester is over, is doing a little bit of, we got this introduction template, but I've got another one, which is the Tlingit introducing someone template. And we'll just work for a few minutes in pairs and we'll introduce each other so that we can use these things. Because a long time ago, if somebody was invited and they wanted them to speak, there would be some host who would let people know who that was. You didn't have to introduce yourself. Getting to the clan house, ye hit ye do wasap ha nakahiti. Ye hit ye do wasap ha nakahiti. Last time we had peach pit ayaha nakahiti. Oh wait, peach pit hit ayaha nakahiti. Go!
Peach pit hit.
Peach pit hit ayaha nakahiti.
Peach pit hit ayaha.
And then this next one is also really powerful. This is the same ye do a song. That's just learning. You could specify the stuff after. So you could say Jeshpati ye do a song achtla. Let's just fix it. Susie ye do a song achtla.
Susie ye do a song achtla.
Ye do a song achish.
Jimmy ye do a song achish.
And then that ye do song.
Like Dakusitan?
Like, just you. No snow yet. So ye do sagen, the verb changes its shape. The classifier goes from ya, which is why we got do was saw, because we got do plus ya. And then the ya changes to 0 when we get do saw. The ya, when it pops up, it means the verb has happened. When it goes to 0, that means the verb hasn't happened. And this is what we call a decessive form of the verb. Ye do sagen. This is a very subtle way to say that somebody's no longer alive. Ye do sagen ach ish. So it's a way to say who somebody is, but also to let people know that they're not around. Let's just go. Bob ye do sagen ach ish.
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 So let's do a sort of round the room thing so we got a chance to hear. I know you guys have just been listening online. So using this top one, so we'll pick somebody who's alive and just say their name and kinship term afterwards. For example, I'll go first. And I would say Skinya ye do wasak of hun. And it doesn't have to be a Tlingit name, it could be English or it could be any other language. But you're saying the name ye do wasak and then the kinship term.
Ye chagu ye do wasaf achun.
Bev ye do a saf achtla.
Okay.
I'm not understanding the kinship term, or any of them?
It could be anybody. So you just pick anybody and then you use a kinship term after. So if it was your mom, then you'd say her name, ye do wasak achtla. Or if it was your dad, or if it was your sister.
So you'd be like, ach ish, ye do a sock.
So you have their name first.
Oh,
What's the name?
Alexander,
Ye do wasak
ye do a sock.
ach ish.
Ach ish.
Sierra ye do saf achtla. Is that right? Yeah.
Miskeda ye do sak ach.
Is that
Eat.
Guzuha ye do sak hunk. Hunk.
Okay. Ye tuchka.
Trish ye do a sock ach keek.
Okay.
Cogni ye do sagen ach clock do art.
Chish. Achgate.
Yukdei ye do a sock ach yeet.
Okay. Shkuyesh.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Okay, so you're going to say the name of somebody, and then ye do a sock, and then a kinship term. So, you know, achpa, or achish. And you're just picking anybody. There's no scripted requirement.
Ye do chitzini, ye do a sock ach da.
Okay. Okay. Chish. Okay. So now we've got Juan, and that's people.
I'm Kate on the phone.
Oh, yeah, egg and chish.
So we say the name first, and then you do a saw,
And
and
then
then turn.
yep.
Reggie, you do a saw, like each.
Yeah, egg and chish. Sorry, I didn't know you were there.
I had it on you. I had my son with me.
I couldn't see you.
So do we say who was used to be living now?
We could, yes, yeah, okay, let's do that. So now we'll pick somebody that we'll honor with a phrase with ye du sagen, and that means that they're not around anymore. Gushtahin ye du sagen ach chish ach ta du ish.
Beverly ye do sagen ach sleek ach ish do klar.
Susie, ye do sagen, ach, schlicht, ach, ich, du, klar.
Aina ye du sagen. How do you say the ending?
Say what?
The ending part, or like.
It's the kinship term. So it'd be like, ugh. We've all used chish like your grandparent. How is the person?
The grandmother.
Yeah, it's ach chish.
Could I say one in like the grandparent, or like the, like not grandmother, but then the grandfather? Or it's the same?
It's the same, but
Oh.
what each of us had done is we said like, that's why I said ach chish. And then afterwards it's ach ka du ish, my mother's father. So sometimes you specify that, but you don't have to.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, woensdag de klar, je du sagen, ach, heel goed zijn, ach, klar, du sich.
G, ach, je du sagen, ach, ich, du klar.
Kasu ye do sagen ach kwa.
Ich tuchka.
Amanda ye do sagen ach sleek ach klar do klar.
Okay. Ach geich.
Eleanor ye do sag klisk. Ach klar do klar.
Okay. Shkuyeich.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing. I don't really understand.
Oh, bummer. Okay, so ye du sagen is what we call a decessive verb, and we're using it. It means it's not. It doesn't happen anymore. So you're saying he or she used to be called this. People used to call him or her this, but don't. And in this context, it means you're sort of acknowledging somebody, but you're letting people know that they're not alive anymore. So you're choosing a relative who's deceased and saying they're in the kinship term afterwards. So my example was Gushdehin ye du sagen achlief achka du ish.
Okay, just give me a minute.
Okay. We can come back to it in a second. Ton
Ye du sagen Kel? Is that mother? Yeah.
Yeah, and so you say the name first.
Alice. Ye du sagen Kel.
Ye du sagen
Ye du sagen
achka.
Akla.
Okay. Okay, Shvuyek, you ready?
Yeah. Wenn you du sagen achlief.
Okay, Cheesh. Okay, so now we've got Quan, which is the area you're from. So you could say Quan, Aku Quan, Kuskokwim Quan. Where are you from? What's the area? Bethel?
Or I think that's Cusco area.
How do you say it in Yupik?
Oh, what's Bethel in Yupik? Mamdalake.
You say that. And so this is, in the Tlingit way of looking at this, this is where your name comes from. Where your name comes from is the Quan that you belong to. So even if you were born on Mars, if your name comes from Drive, say Quan, and that's where you're from. That's where if you were to talk about yourself, that's where you're from. There's different ways to say, I was born here, and we'll look at that one. And then, but I was from somewhere else. And then the next one down is where you live. So you could say, Juno Yechat Yati. White horse Yechat Yati. White horse Yechat Yati. Seed Kach Yechat Yati. Seed Kach Yechat Yati. Mars Yechat Yati. Mars Yechat Yati. I'm just saying. Mars de etaknaku. Get your butt to Mars. So we see that there's another locative. It's a suffix that goes on, and it means to reside or to be at rest at a place. So when we're using this yeyati form of the verb, when it combines with that, it means to live somewhere, to be located somewhere. Okay. Dak anachsa isati. Dak anachsa isati. I've always wanted to make like a Tlingit dating site, so like it would have this question, and then when you clicked it, like half the faces would all go away. And it would be like, did your family tree, and then like another 30% of the faces. Dak kwan dak sawae. Dak kwan dak sawae. Dak kwan dak sawae. It's like which community you're from, which region. Then we'll probably wrap up today with these pronouns. So this is getting into the plural pronouns. So we've done the singular forms and saying, we're starting with these sort of three then adding 3 more to the mix, and then you should have a pretty good feeling of those. So you could say Wuhan,
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 Yuhan,
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 Hus,
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 Ha,
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 Yi,
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 Hustu,
Hastu,
Hustu.
Tu,
And we get into the subjects. T,
Tu,
T,
Tu,
Yi,
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 Hus,
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 Ha,
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 Yi,
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 Hus,
Hus,
Hus.
Hus.
So getting into pluralizing the third person of verbs, it's a little bit sneaky in Tlingit. We'll look at that later. But then, going back up to this jiwu thing. So if you say, Dana ach jiwu,
Dana Jiwu,
Dana ha jiwu,
Dana Ha Jiwu,
Kesh dana ach ji,
Kesh Dana Ach Ji,
Kesh dana ha ji,
Kesh Dana Ha Ji,
Dana yi jiwu,
Dana Yi Jiwu,
Dana hastu jiwu,
Dana Hastu Jiwu,
Hayu chatungi hastu jiwu,
Hayu Chahambi Hastu Jiwu,
Kesh dana hastu ji.
Kesh Dana Hastu Ji.
So we're seeing how those things can work. Just adding 3 more pronouns to the mix, and we'll do the same thing with some of these verbs. The one to see doesn't always work best for a plural verb, but we'll look at some other verbs and start pluralizing them, goofing around with them and changing them a little bit. Right. Any last minute questions? We have 10 seconds. So for next week, we'll start class with naming as many birds as we can. We're going to name them. Same thing we tried with the animals. I'm not going to say who did better in these 2 beginning Tlingit sections, but you guys did pretty good. So we'll see how many birds we can do. Same thing. So study them. But once we get in here, we'll start without looking at any notes, going from memory, and without trying to repeat them. See how many bird names we can learn over the weekend. All right. Finish cheese. One.
Goodness, geez.